Hi, this is Susan from Susan B. Cards. Today I'm going to share a mixed media technique that I like to use. I'm going to start with a piece of Distress Mixed Media Heavystock. This is an A2 size. I just buy the large sheets and cut them down. I'm going to spray the paper with a little bit of water. And then I'm going to use Tarnished brass. Shake this up. Get a decent amount on the paper, and then mix the paper again with some water. And this will get the spray to move. This is a little bit different than most of the sprays. This one has a metallic finish to it. So I'm just going to move it a little bit more near the edges. Just spray a little bit more so I can get some near the bottom. And now I'm going to dry it. I want a little bit more coverage on this, so I'm going to spray it some more. Just mist it a little bit more to move it. I think that's pretty good. Next, I am taking Distress Resist Spray, and I'm going to spray a bit onto my paper. You for sure want to do this in a box so you don't get this on anything else, because once it's dry, it will not come off your surfaces. So you can see a few of the milky spots that I have here. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to spray some Distress Oxide inks onto it. So now the Distress Resist Spray is dried, and it will resist any of the other colors I'm spraying on top of it. It'll trap areas of the brass color and not let it mix with the colors that I'm spraying. I start with Distress Oxide spray in peeled paint, and then over that I put some Rustic Wilderness, and then I top that with some regular Distress spray stain in Unchartered Mariner. I spray it all with water, and the colors will start to mix with the brass in the areas that it doesn't have the Distress Resist Spray. I like to give it a bit of a soft, hazy look using Distress Oxide Speckled Egg. I think the blue gives it a nice aged patina look. This is a very similar process as Tim Holtz's Eroded Metallic, but that one uses Distress paint. This is just the sprays, so they will continue to mix, whereas acrylic paint will not continue to mix. The last color I put down was Distress Ink in Faded Jeans, and then I'm spraying with water so the colors mix, but I'm still keeping some of the areas separate. And you can still see the big blotches where the Distress Resist spray dried. I like to dry it and see where I am. And you can see that the Distress Oxide gives it a very soft, hazy look. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of the, I think it's Faded Jeans, the dark blue, just in a couple areas. And I'm going to just use a little bit more water to move the paint and mix it and soften it a little bit, just to get a little bit of dark areas here and there. But once it's all dry, you'll see that it has a very soft look. I want to add a little bit of dark area, so I'm spraying it with Walnut stain. I'm adding a little water just to get it to move a little bit again, and then I'm going to dry it. After I dried it, I felt like it needed a little bit more brown, so I repeated this process with a walnut stain, spraying, misting it with some water to move it, and then drying it. And that completed the panel. I added the Tim Holtz Forest Shadows dyes on this one. I will show you how I age the trees on my next card. I made the same panel again, and I'm going to top it with a different dye called Lovestruck. After the panel dried, I embossed it with this Tim Holtz Sizzix embossing folder. So you can see all the texture that's on it. I'm going to take some Versamark and just lightly rub it over the raised areas. I don't want to press it I don't want to press it too much because I don't want it to get all over the background, but I do want it to get on those little raised areas. And then I'm going to take some Gilded Brutus Monroe embossing powder. And then I'm going to heat emboss this. Some of the gold embossing powder stuck to the background, but that's fine. It adds to the glittery effect. This is a die set I'm using. It's the Sizzix Tim Holtz Lovestruck die set. You cut the first layer from black cardstock. And then I'm going to use the Distress Embossing Dabber to put down some embossing ink in a few areas that are going to be seen once all the pieces are layered together. And then I'm going to put some gold embossing powder, the same Brutus Monroe Gilded that I used before. Very little of this first layer will show. The die actually embosses a line that indicates how much of it will show, and it's very little. And that's where I dabbed on the embossing ink and I'm putting the embossing powder. I just wanted to give it a bit of a metallic but aged look. So it doesn't, the embossing powder doesn't have to be solid. It's a little bit uneven, and some areas are missing some of the powder, and that's fine too. I'm moving on to the third layer, which is just red cardstock, and I'm applying the embossing powder in the same way that I did for the first layer. I didn't show the second layer because all that was I die cut a piece of paper that was from my stash, and it was exactly the same eroded metallic type paper that I had made for the background. I should have mentioned earlier that I'm making two hearts here, a small one and a large one, and the layers are exactly the same for each. I'm just putting the layers together to see how the completed heart will look. The top layer is cut from red metallic paper. Later, I will go ahead and age that as well. I was originally going to keep it like this, but I thought it was just a little bit too shiny. I want to give an aged look to the embossing powder, so I'm using some Distress crayons. This is Walnut stain, and I'm just randomly placing down some of the crayon in areas just to make it look a little bit older. If you've worked with Distress crayons, you know that they only move when you use some water and your finger or a brush to move it. It's not like the spray stains where when you spray water on it, it moves. So now this is some Rustic Wilderness that I'm adding. And next I add some Tarnished Brass. I actually add that to a few of the spots that I missed the embossing powder to. Lastly, I add the Mermaid Lagoon Distress Crayon. I have a wet paper towel. It's just slightly damp. And I'm going to use that with my finger to kind of mix all the colors, soften them a bit so there's no harsh edges. I add the next layer here, and that's the ready inked paper that I had. And then the third layer is the red paper, and the fourth layer is the metallic red paper. I get an idea of how the whole thing looks and which pieces I want to add a little bit of Distress Crayon to age. I use the same colors here, so I'm not going to show the whole process again, but it's exactly the same as the first layer. I'm going to age the red metallic paper. I'm using gold metallic ink just so that I can see where the embossing powder is going to end up, but you can easily use a Versamark pad or the same Distress ink dauber that I used earlier. I still want some of the red metallic paper to show through, so I'm just brushing off a few areas of where the gold embossing powder is. It'll end up giving it a very aged look, and it's an uneven application. Now I'm melting the embossing powder, but you have to be careful when you're working with metallic paper because it's coated and you could end up melting some of the paper as well. So I try to do this quickly. I ensure that the heat gun is properly heated before I put it on the paper. I repeated the process of using the Distress Crayon to age the embossing powder. So I finished aging the embossing powder, and I'm just using a bit of the crayon just to darken the edges of the paper. Now it's time to glue all the pieces together. So I'm just going to speed up that part so you can quickly see it. And I'm only going to show you the large heart because the small heart is exactly the same. Now I'm going to age the panel just a little bit with some Ground Espresso Archival ink. I have a mini pad that I'm using, which makes it easy to get into the little spots. And I'm just rubbing it randomly on the panel. It's okay if it gets onto some of the beading. I think it gives it a nice aged look. I use a paper towel just to soften a few of those harsh lines. Now I'm ready to attach the hearts, and there's also an arrow that goes with the set, and I just used some scrap paper and made that up. The sentiment is from the Tim Holtz sticker book, and I used some collage medium to attach that. Those are the 2 cards that I made. If you found the video helpful, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. All the supplies are listed underneath the video in the description. Thanks for watching.